He went on the boat to New Zealand from the UK in like the 40s before commercial airliners. They were picking people with skills to populate New Zealand. My experience with school was kind of falling through the cracks. I got really disillusioned with the music industry. Fame's a weird thing, like it changes both the people with the fame and the people around the fame. This is awful, like I don't want to be a part of this. And so I said, fuck it, and I went traveling. The Argentine economy's really difficult to do business in. I got a call from the British Embassy and they were like, last flight out, like, are you coming? And I'm like, I don't think I want to go back to the UK. I firmly believe that the biggest reason why people don't jump into this lifestyle is fear of the unknown. We're gonna see like a real explosion of people wanting to be involved in this movement.
Amazing. Everyone, thank you for being here for the ARC Firesides on Network and City States. I am very happy to be here with Dan from Noma Collective. This is great. I think someone at the dinner last night, referenced correctly that you have like more experience doing this stuff that we're doing than anyone else, but perhaps still a little bit below the radar. So I'm glad that we're here to find out a little bit more about you and your background. But yeah, Dan, wait, you're a Brit with me, right?
I am.
Where are you from?
I was born in London, in Kensal Green, Northwest. But yeah, more than 15 years outside now. I think I've tipped the scales. I've been outside more than I've been inside. So
God. Yeah, so tell us. So you're in London. Did you do school? Did you do uni in London as well? Or
no, I didn't. So my dad's a singer, and my mum was a groupie of my dad.
Yeah.
And so very early on, traveling a lot. He went on the boats to New Zealand from the UK in like the 40s before commercial airliners. And so they were picking people with skills to populate New Zealand. And so they went out there through Pitcairn Island, 8 weeks. If you can imagine, we've come a long way in like, 70 years. And so I spent my childhood between New Zealand, UK and the States. I actually went to university in the States and I ended up not finishing it. I got what you call the associate arts, which is like halfway. I went to community college, which was fun experience. My experience with school was kind of falling through the cracks. I'm not like a written learner. I don't know what it's like now in school, but as you know, back in the day in school in England, it was very copy off a board, and that's just not me. So yeah, it was kind of like not the best experience, honestly, for me.
Interesting. But okay, you didn't get on the boat with that to get that?
No. By that time there were flights, so it was a little easier. Although it's still 24 hours. So
Yeah. I had a great granddad or something that also was like a £10 pom. So to Australia.
Same, yeah.
Right. The ticket was like £10 to get your eight-week boat journey to the other side of the world and start a new life.
Yeah, and you're promised a job and a house and a new life.
That was the frontier. So you got it in your blood, basically.
Yeah. And then my dad moved back to the UK, and then I ended up kind of living there early, and then kind of going between that, and then I followed in their footsteps early into the music industry, and like around about 19, started right at the birth of dubstep, got into like these kind of nights in what was an emerging scene, and then like
Is this back in London?
Back in London, in a club called The End. I don't know if that resonates with you, but it was like where house music was kind of born. Leo and Bushwhacker did their residency there for years, and now it's a block of flats, which is a common theme for London. Losing the culture, which we can get to later.
Under attack.
Don't lose the culture. We can't lose the culture. So yeah, and then that kind of led me into music festivals. So kind of feels like a random set of circumstances, but when I look back, it's like always creating a safe space and a platform for people to come together, like-minded thought processes, and kind of like giving that space for those things to happen across like the arts, basically.
Interesting. I mean, so what were you doing at the end of the club?
We were doing every Wednesday dubstep night at the birth of dubstep. My sister was going out with Scream's brother. I don't know if that resonates with anyone, but Scream was like the godfather of dubstep. Yeah, and And so, yeah, it was one of those things where I think life just throws you these moments where you make a decision like that you're hopefully like not ready for, but you should just do it anyway.
Yeah.
We were doing like 100-person nights once a month, and we had this opportunity to take a Wednesday night in a 1,000-cap club, which is a very stupid decision. You should never do that. Like, never do a weekly night because you just finished the other one and you got to start the next one. But I got, for a random set of circumstances, got put in contact with this guy called Jack Robinson, who is my longest business partner. I've been working together since I was 19. I'm now 38. So, and he was setting up music festivals in Croatia, a very well-known festival called Outlook, which is like, it was the kind of a big movement in the kind of dub scene, which kind of spans all the music from Jamaica all the way through to like, electronic influence dub.
Yep.
And so he had the people and we had the vibe and we rolled the dice, and it became this really beautiful event that like spanned about 3 or 4 years. And then I got really disillusioned with the music industry. It's kind of a very ego-driven, and fame's a weird thing. Like it changes both the people with the fame and the people around the fame. And I remember super clearly I was in this like meeting because I would moonlight doing the events, and I work for this PR company, and we got the contract for Kesha, which she's a pretty big artist, and they were like, it's covered, she's going to be #1, like we've got everything bought and paid for. And I was just like, this is awful, like I don't want to be a part of this. And so I said fuck it, and I went traveling, and I went traveling for like 15 months with the thought that I would come back, get it out of my system. And I came back, I got a job, and I lasted 3 weeks, and I decided to move to Argentina to learn Spanish. And that was 15 years ago. So,
Okay, and was that the end of the music phase though?
kind of. Jack would keep calling me, being like, help, I need someone to come and do the production. And I would come back for the summer and do that. So my job used to be get to a field with nothing and turn it into an event. So toilets, staging, people flow, make sure it all runs, which is, I think, why, Noma is now kind of like relatively good with doing like what we've done, like 45 pop-up villages or cities this year in 30 countries. So it's a slightly different logistical nightmare, but yeah, less people, less problems is normally like the line.
Sure. But you were specialized in lots of people, lots of problems, right?
Yeah.
But okay, so you moved to Argentina doing Spanish.
Doing Spanish, yeah.
Did you succeed?
I succeeded.
Speak Spanish?
I still speak Spanish. I'm now like, pretty fluent. I married a Uruguayan lady. We've been together now 10 years. My kid actually speaks more Spanish than English right now, although we're working on it. We currently live in Mexico, so it's his first language. But yeah, we was in Argentina, and I always kind of end up going back in some way, shape or form to music. We ended up doing these like secret parties that were like in houses. I think like a club is actually not a great place for an event. I think they're kind of like, if you want to go dance, they're great, but actually I find like trying to listen to someone in a rave is really difficult. So a house creates unique spaces where you can kind of like, siphon off and do, have different unique moments and experiences, which I think makes for a much more cohesive event, right? So we were doing these secret parties where you would give the address after buying a ticket, and kind of like, it was very much like starting in the disco funk vibe, so very friendly, and then ending in like the electronic music, but always with vocals and kind of like instruments, not so like hard techno. Like I love that, but that just wasn't like our vibe.
Yep.
And then we ended, my time in Argentina kind of crescendoed to this like arts members club. We got this mansion in the south of Buenos Aires, which if you haven't been is like beautiful architecture, like Art Deco mansions with spiral staircases and like, stained glass windows, and just wild. And in like the, I don't know the exact time, but in like either like 1910 or 1920, there was a cholera outbreak, and all of the rich people moved away from the south of the city to Palermo, which is now like the bougie part. And so this like amazing architecture and kind of fell into disarray. A prime example of an opportunity for distressed real estate, which is was the conversation that you were having with Jacob before this. But it was kind of a Soho House before Soho House was a thing. So focused on the arts. We'd have like we turned a room into a cinema. We had like events and kind of a museum vibe, exhibitions, things like So Far Sounds. I don't know if you know that. Like, did a bunch of stuff. Like Art Basel did their opening parties there a bunch of times for Arte Bar, which is like their version of like, I guess like, like big art fair and stuff. So And then the owner of that place was an absolute madman, and in the end, it like spectacularly failed, which was, I guess, the trajectory I had to go on for a bunch of lessons. So yeah, the Argentine economy is really difficult to do business in, and so when that fell through, I was like, I think I need to move like closer to a stable economy, and the next closest stable economy is Uruguay. And so I went to Uruguay and got this investment, found this beautiful house. I had been working with my buddy Jack on stuff that was a little bit more experiential. So like taking down the number of participants and really working on like more of like a higher ticket, like kind of fully immersed experience. So it evolved from this like feeling I had that us as a generation, we want like the comfort of a Marriott, but we want the vibe of a hostel. And there really isn't there is now, co-lives kind of do that, but like Selena was kind of, I think, the original mover in that space. But it's like, you know, you go to a Marriott and it's just cold and there's no vibe, but you've got the really nice bed. And then you go to the hostel and you're in a bunk bed, but you go to the vibe and like, you know, I can't do bunk beds anymore. Like, you know what I mean?
We're grown up.
And so it was born out of that. It was like, okay, what can we do? And we found this beautiful property in Jose Ignacio, which is in like a really beautiful area, Punta del Este. Like really, really lovely. And it had like a bunch of olive trees on it. And it was like this idea of like farm to table, fully immersive experience where everyone sat and ate together and kind of really nailing this kind of community experience and giving people that space. And it was like partly digital nomads who would go, partly families. And we weren't really quite as kind of nailed on the client base at that point. It was very much just anyone who wanted to come and have more of a community experience. And we signed the paperwork and everything was done and the venue pulled out. And that was like September 2019. And the high season's really short in Uruguay. So we didn't have enough time to go find a new location.
Right.
And I'm a firm believer in serendipity. Things happen for a reason. Sure. And like that moment was a key factor to like me even being here today or being in any way, shape or form involved in this movement. Because the guy who was going to invest was like, well, I run all these hotels in Belize. Like, do you want to come to Belize? And I literally took my phone out and like Googled Belize. It was like, well, that place looks really nice. Like, and me and my wife were like, should we do it? And we got on a flight having never gone there and moved to Belize. This was like November 2019. And so there we are, like painting this place to open again, and COVID hit and everything fell through. And we had this opportunity to like either I got a call from the British Embassy and they were like, last flight out, like, are you coming? And I'm like, I don't think I want to go back to the UK. This seems like a better place. So we stayed and I ended up looking after this hotel. He had built this 120 bed hotel that was closed because of COVID. I'm literally in this hotel, like on my own with my wife, me and one other person, making sure that no one like squats it, right? It was like a condo ownership. So these owners really wanted to make sure that shit wasn't going to go sour, right?
Yep.
And I'm in this hotel and I'm like watching Zoom stock go through the roof, like remote work. And I'm just like, this is a thing. Like, this is definitely a thing. And so when the borders were looking to open up, there was still no tourism. And we were like, fuck it, let's roll the dice on like a kind of V1 of what turned into Noma Collective, which is like a kind of remote work co-live, or like a pop-up village is now what we call it. So we you know, pretended like there was people. I got everyone I knew to the beach and like we filmed kind of at like the right angle to make it look like there was people. And we made this video and we put some ads out, thinking like it would just be a pastime before we could do festivals with all the other ideas. And yeah, it blew the fuck up, man. We sold out like the whole hotel in like 3 weeks for 3 months. And I think partly it was like everyone just wanted to get the fuck out of like where they were, and we were offering this bubble. At this point we had to like test in, test out. It was like a real bubble. You couldn't really leave the resort. There was a curfew at that point, but we were able to set up like a shop and a place, and we created this little village basically where people could come. And I think the longest someone stayed was like 8.5 months. And like we were able to just, like create this safe space for people to come together. And I think like, you know, a lot of people here are really focused on super important things like governance and like, you know, how we're going to create these systems. But we're always looking at it from a bottom up. Like, what are these people going to do in these spaces? Should the chairs be placed here or here for the best like community experience, you know? And so that was a lot of what we did. We kind of were putting together these, I guess, like protocols of like how we connect people, what's the way to make sure that they get this maximum experience. And the main learning from this is I kept like, it was a month, you had to come stay for a month minimum. And what we realized is most of these people were not like nomads actually at all. They were remote work, people who had an office job, who got a remote work job, who lived a very normal life, who were lonely and unsatisfied with what the life that they were living. And they were like, I'd find them on week 3, like looking out into the ocean, and I'd be like, what's up? I would walk the beach and meet people. At that moment, it was really important for me to get to know everyone. They'd be like, yeah, I'm rethinking my whole life, dude. My priorities are shifting, and I think I want to like pack my shit up and go travel.
Yeah.
And so when that was happening and the regulations were rolling back, we were like, fuck, okay, I think we need to take the learnings from this co-live and kind of take this pop-up model, because that was like a rolling date format. And then we decided like, why don't we go into more like locations so that we could continue to offer this service to people as they're traveling around. So we took those learnings, we rebranded to Noma Collective, and we launched in like 8 countries in 21. And so like about maybe, I would say the end of that year, someone passed me the Network State book, a friend of mine who was an early mover in Ethereum in Canada, and was like, dude, you're building this, like read this book, you're doing something similar. And that's kind of like how I got into the space. So
Very interesting. Could we dive into more detail on that again? So you'd made this model work in Belize, and then you were like, okay, let's launch 8 countries all at once in 21.
Yeah, terrible idea.
Yeah, do you want to just talk a little bit more about that? Yeah.
So like, I think a little bit, I felt it was a moment, and if we didn't take it, that it may pass us by, and I really wanted to make an impact. So we picked took out the black book through the festival days and was like, where do we know people? I was like, I know people in Kenya, I know people in Buenos Aires, I know people in Italy, and so we just were like, who's got a place where we can do this to try and, because we were bootstrapped up until very recently. So it was like, I couldn't go to all these places, that wasn't possible. So it was like, who can we pull in? And so we basically were like, okay, 3 weeks to a month, depending on the visa restrictions of that place, and also the rental restrictions. Like certain places, you're not going to get it in a hotel. You're going to get like a co-live, and co-lives have minimum rentals for months. So based on those prerequisites, we were like, okay, let's build this structure where you can kind of take away the friction and the fear for people to jump into this lifestyle, right? So what's the number one thing that happens to people when they start traveling is they get scammed at the airport. Like that's very common, right? And then, it only takes one person to go traveling and come back and tell all their friends, oh no, man, and then they don't do it, right? Like I really firmly believe that the biggest reason why people don't jump into this lifestyle is fear of the unknown, and whatever they've been told or whatever they've watched on TV, So it's like, take away all that friction, give them a safe space to meet people, and obviously a place to work, minimal infrastructure, make sure you can do your job, right? Wi-Fi, desks, things like that. But really, it's loneliness that we're solving for. Like people are lonely. They want to, travel the world, and they don't have anyone to do it with. And so that's like the model. It's like, you can go anywhere with us. You can kind of get picked up. You get, like a soft landing. You can do your job. And when you close your laptop, you're with 15 to 50 like-minded people in a beautiful place. You go climb the volcano, you go diving, or, go to the rave in Buenos Aires.
And this is it. So the core product, even from the beginning, was this, your first digital nomad experience, going somewhere for 3 to 4 weeks, knowing that you were going to be in a small group of like-minded people with support and an infrastructure. I mean, how did it go? The first 8, did you run 8 in 8 different locations in that first year?
Yeah. We had a couple that a lot of learnings, like the ones in Buenos Aires went really well because I'd lived there for a long time.
Sure.
Africa is wild, and there was a lot of learnings there. We were told, yeah, you got the internet, and this is so important. Words, questions are so important, right? So I was like, do you have internet? Yeah, I've got great internet. Well, they did have great internet. What they didn't tell me is that the power goes out every 2 hours, right? And then it just goes out for a minute, and then comes back less, maybe even 20 seconds. but you're on a Zoom call for your business that's like maybe they don't even know that you're where you're there. That's enough for you to lose your job or have disgruntled customers. So those are the types of learnings that that we took away from that first year. But then, you know, on the plus of Kenya, it's like we're in Watamu, which is on the coast, and like, you know, the experience of going on like a pirate ship and going to the local community and being integrated, like we spoke about this last night. I think for this movement to be successful, we need to integrate as quick as possible with the local community. And that doesn't mean telling them all about like this new idea we have. It means about meeting in the middle over music and food and sports and kind of just connecting. Because, you know, we're probably going to come up against some heat in the next 5 to 10 years. And they're probably going to go out to the locals and be like, these people are bad and you want them on your side, right? So I think that's like, you know, we've always been super worried about being tarnished with the like neo-colonialism brush, like, you know, not even talking about the network society movement, just about travel, right? Like, you know, 2 white guys from England going to these ex-colonial countries. And, you know, so I think social impact is the way to avoid that, or at least have the rebuttal. They're not going to stop talking, but you have the answer, I think.
That's super interesting. Maybe like dive into that a little bit. I think one of the things that's special about these pop-up cities that people are going is that they are going and being with a group of like-minded people, and they're maybe finding themselves in this place they've not been before, right? And it's like integrating with locals. At what point does that destroy that initial kind of like product, you know, that everyone was so interested about, right? It's like, oh, you know, like everyone here is just like building these amazing frontier technologies and just like they're all these really like-minded people. And it's like if you know, it's just like, where's this line, right? Because it's like, you know, if you created half of your permanent accommodation was actually where you know, all the locals also lived within that, like would that eliminate the beginning of the product? Maybe you'd have less problems, you know, on a PR perspective, but like, you know, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the living quarters, I see the value, you know, time and time again of getting a bunch of builders together in a place, or even just getting a bunch of people to come together for wellness or over like-minded concepts. Like, you know, the personal development is where we sit more than the professional development. Like, but I totally see it. And I don't think they have to come live with you. I just think there's like different moments of the day for different things. It's like, that's the way I look at music as well. It's like, you know, I'm not going to listen to jazz when I'm raving out in the night, but it's like when I'm working, I'll probably listen to like, you know, bossa nova or something. When I'm cooking, and so I think it's the same for this. Like, you know, the week is comprised of very different moments for different things. And so I think that it's not mutually exclusive. I think you can totally maintain this beautiful ecosystem that you've created in this space with these builders, and you can also break and have a dinner and learn about why these people do what they do in their culture. And maybe there's like an information exchange that's a bit more two-way. I think that's because there's a lot of, when I go traveling, I always use the simple example of when I went to Japan. And I just was so clear that I should never wear shoes in like the house after I went there. And that's just like an example of something that I think when you learn from other cultures, you can then like build your own, like, you know, protocol for life. And I think you don't get that unless you go and understand how those cultures live.
No, I think it's very fair. But then, so 8 in the first year, 45 in the last year.
45 this year, yeah, and then we're into I think it's about...
So 45 already in this calendar year?
By the end of the year.
By the end of the year.
Yeah. And I think that's, you know, we've got a good rhythm now. It's a plug and play product, and really, like, you know, thanks to my team, I'm able to come and do these things, and I'm thinking much more about this bigger vision and the bigger picture, and how ultimately this product that we've built, I think, is this like onboarding to the network society movement. And I think I mentioned it to you briefly, but it's something that I've been thinking about a lot, is this nomenclature problem, this like definition problem in nascent spaces. Like, I went to a talk, so it was after I met you. When I came to your first pop-up in Austin, I met John Hillis from Cabin, and he did a talk about that, and it really blew my mind because I was like, fuck, this is a thing that's really important for the network society space. Like, oh, is the word state appropriate? Do people have a feeling about that word? And then it depends, like, based on probably what your local government was like, how happy you are with those words. And but the digital nomad space, I think for me anyway, it was the exact same thing. I feel like the word digital nomad is not an appropriate umbrella term.
Sure.
I think it's a stage in a cycle. So like the way I see it is, you start in the sedentary lifestyle where you got 2 weeks a year holiday and you're in one place. And by the way, like actually, that's quite temporary in the scope of human, society. We started as nomads. We came into, cities via agriculture and industrial era to build technology for us to redisperse, in my opinion. I think we're on the moment now of the redisperse. So, you're sedentary and then you get this remote job, which allows the freedom. Like that's the step, right, for me. And that's where I'm focusing on. It's like, once you have the remote job, you make money on the internet, that is the biggest single step to freedom, right? And then you dip your toes in with a network society pop-up village or a Noma trip, right? And then you take off your training wheels and you're a digital nomad and you're in this massive expansive moment where you're picking all the, you're traveling, you're learning, you're meeting friends. And then this guy, Emmy from Crecimiento, which is, in the Zuzala movement, he came up with this term multi-local, which I loved and I totally have stolen with his blessing. And I think that the multi-local, which is feeling at home in more than 2 places, is the progression of digital nomadism. So you're in this expansive moment, you find places that you like, and then you start to put down roots. If we're going to build a society, you can't be transient. You've got to and you were the first person that said that to me. You were like, dude, like pop-ups are cool, but like we need to figure this out, like to get further, because it can't just keep in the pop-up space forever. And I think they're good for top of funnel. Like, don't get me wrong. Maybe they will run it like in parallel, but like we also need the next piece. So, you become multi-local, and then you kind of, from the multi-local piece, you go from the individual into the collective, into the group. And that may be for you to be around like-minded people. It may be to start a family or whatever. And then essentially that's when you're into the network society. So like, that's what I want to do. I'm really just focusing on this, like talking about these like 7 stages of remote life in the hope that like we can get some definitions that people align with, and they see this really easy pathway to go from like in the office, grayscale, unhappy, to like this flourishing new society where they have, autonomy and freedom and all the things that I think everyone wants. Like when you take away the tech terms or whatever, it's like you just break it down to brass tacks. It's like they're disillusioned with the way that their society is working. You only got to look 10 minutes to know that your tax money isn't going where you want it to go, right? And so I think like if we're able to bridge that gap, then I think we're gonna see like a real explosion of people wanting to be involved in this movement.
Before we dive into a little bit again, like this future you're hinting at, I just want to sort of like reiterate sort of like what you're already achieving, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, we talk about, we've ARC's run a couple of pop-ups, right? You've run 45 this year. How many are running simultaneously right now whilst you're sat chilling on the stage?
I think we have 4 running right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And each of those has got 40 people that are hanging out somewhere around the world, co-living, co-working, co-playing together.
Yeah, exactly. And one of them right now is super cool because it was completely built by the community. So we basically got them to like vote on everything from start to finish. And they picked Croatia as the place, and they're just 2 locations. They picked the community facilitator. They picked everything basically from start to finish.
And you still were able to charge them for all this work.
Yes. and they wanted to pay more because they felt part of it, which is like, I think is a really big, the collective building of these things is really important.
So interesting, right? Because then just give us an idea of the size of that community then. I think it's clear that you have these repeat customers. What's the greatest number of like pop-ups that, what you don't call them pop-up, what do you call these?
We call them additions.
Right.
But I do think, again, when talking about words, I think we need to unify the thought process a little bit. So I think we are like, I do like the idea of these pop-up villages. You know, my thought process originally, and it's kind of coming full circle, is that there are villages and there are pop-ups, and they're going to run simultaneously. And so like, that's kind of, you know, in Argentina, we've run 6 pop-ups this year. And it's like, at this point, we might as well just like buy the property and
Yep.
just like, you know, do 6 or 8 and then have some other months for other people like you or whoever to come through.
Yep.
So yeah, I think like the transition is imminent. In fact, we have officially now a piece of land in Belize, which is the first time I'm talking about this, which is pretty cool.
We keep on getting like world first. That is fucking great.
Yeah, it's crazy actually. It's a piece of land in Punta Gorda, which is in the south, which was originally a military like zoned. So it's all like it was like a piece of the British. So the British owned, you know, it was British Honduras before it was Belize. And so when they left, it was like basically already been pre-zoned as a like, not a free zone, but it has its own unique zoning that is like outside of the normal zoning. And it still to this day is that. And one of my early investors and just friends, his dad bought it in an auction, like when the country went independent in the 80s. And like, it's just been sitting there and it's untouched land. So we're going to develop that, I think, in the next couple of years. And yeah, we are so I want to talk. So I really believe that the ultimate like kind of buy-in from your community is ownership. And so for a long time, I've been thinking about how can the community be owners? And obviously there are some juxtapositions when you talk about that, because you know, when you have a vision, you need to have autonomy. And so there's like, what does that look like? And what I landed on was, I think that like so we're building this ecosystem, right? You've got the physical layer, the digital layer, and then the governance layer. And on on the physical layer, you know, you've got this like sliding scale of physical spaces. And I think at the lower end, you've got these like apartments, because people don't always want to be in a community. Sometimes they want to go and be a hermit and build, right? And so you've got an apartment, and then you've got like a villa for friends. And then you've got like for lack of a better word, like a boutique hotel where you would do these hyper-personal experiential events like a pop-up. And then, you know, you're building like a village, and then ultimately like a special economic zone, right? And so in the ones that are more permanent, like from the boutique hotel to the zone, I kind of felt like those need to be owned by us or a select group of like investors. But then the villas and the apartments can be completely community owned, because it doesn't really change the trajectory of the business or the community if those collective owners want to liquidate the apartment in Buenos Aires, like they can do that. So what we decided on was to have these properties be fractionally community owned, you know, by the community members. So we've got a villa in Italy that is about 1.4 million euros, and we've got like 15 community members that have put in like between 25 and 50K. And they're essentially, we're community fractionally purchasing this piece of real estate with a local counterpart. That local counterpart will put the rest of the money in as like a long-term loan. And then we will run experiences in that location. And then we will essentially sell off the rest of those fractional pieces, allowing us to have these properties that are community owned, and the ability, depending on the location, the ability for those community members to have like, you know, autonomy on how that property runs and when to liquidate or when to build a pool or whatever they want to do, basically.
So super interesting. So you've been running these temporary sort of experiences. You're realizing that actually sometimes you're responsible for most of that property's sort of like annual, you know, kind of like revenue intake, because you're running like 6 experiences then across a year. And you're like, okay, we should maybe start doing physical stuff. And then you've done 2 physical places immediately. You bought this patch of land in Italy, and then you did the villa in Italy.
Yeah.
Is the patch of land, is that being community owned as well? Or is that something different?
Yeah, so I think within that space, we will lot it out, and there will be opportunities for people. So like, then it's a big piece of land. So that's more, you know, you would imagine that there's like, you know, a village with infrastructure and, you know, private and, you know, residents and commerce and stuff. So I think like the harder thing to figure out there is the zoning, because it's kind of a bit old school in Belize, but we'll figure it out. And yeah, we will be, you know, selling off private property in that space for sure.
And this is part of a new strategy of trying to basically always own the real estate where you're running these pop-ups, or?
So we're working in so many jurisdictions that there's just not one model. Like,
Yeah.
like I love doing stuff in Bali, but like probably wouldn't own land
Yeah,
there.
sure.
So, and then you go like in Kenya, you can't. Like you need a local counterpart, Thailand, same. So I think it really depends on the jurisdiction. But like, it was cool to listen to Dave yesterday, Dave McClure, because he was talking about the intersection of like VC and real estate.
Sure.
And afterwards, I've had this thought process, right? And I went and spoke to him, and he was like, "Yeah, it's a good idea." So I'm like, "Okay, that's good that he thinks it's a good idea." But basically, like, I keep seeing this happen, right? So we went to Belize, and it was not well known for digital nomads. And in 3 years, the property value has like tripled.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's all because of me personally, but I think we definitely had a big, part to play. And then you look at Portugal, and like, if you'd gotten in right at the beginning of that, and so. I'm sitting here going, you would literally need to have like an LLM scrape the data off Nomad list and just look at what's going up and just buy land in that place. And then obviously we can run events in that land and run pop-up villages, and then we have autonomy. And yeah, you can see that curve pretty simply. So I think it's a really interesting proposition, and that's something I'm really, really interested in. Like, I know Asuncion 3 years ago was not on anyone's radar. And now with all of the ability to get your residency there like that, I can guarantee you if you buy land in Asuncion right now, or even just properties, there's a bunch of great builders doing stuff there. It will triple in value in the next 5 years. Like I will put my money on it, right? And there's probably 10 other places like that right now. Like Dave was telling me yesterday that like they found a bunch of oil in Guyana. And like it's just like it's the 40% growth GDP in 1 year, like Guyana maybe, right? Like there are all of these frontier places where you can find these opportunities, and I think also help uplift the local community at the same time.
Yeah. I have some people trying to persuade me to do some stuff in Guyana as well. It's interesting.
I want to go, dude.
Yeah, right.
That has not been.
There's like, again, with all these people we've been speaking, there's like 15 things happening next month. The challenge with running these things, unless you run them as well as you, when you have a team and you can just sort of like lounge around, is that, you need to be doing your own stuff. But okay, so just talk a little bit more about that again, about how you see this now, your community evolving potentially into its own sort of like network society, maybe even with its own special economic zones, the layers even beyond the physical, I guess.
So it's like, at each stage of this remote life, you come across different problems, right? So when you're traveling, but under 6 months of the year, it's very much the problems that we're solving already, like how do I, soft landing, eSIMs, things like that, meeting friends, maybe business development, like, but very soon after 6 months, you start coming across really big issues that, like, I think is where the network society movement really starts to become, a really important piece of this. Like, how are we going to have, like, how are we going to figure out visas for a global citizen? Like, how are we going to figure out governance, I really like this idea of commoditizing your, like, tax dollars, like, and your visas. Like, why are we, like, I should be more powerful if I have, whatever X amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars to be able to pay for taxes. I should be able to choose where that is. And so I'm really excited to explore that piece, and then obviously, like, all these amazing people here doing stuff with decentralized, governance structures and using blockchain technology. Like, I've been kind of adjacent to those spaces, made a hedge in 2016, personally, but, I'm not a builder in that space. So it's like awesome to see how, like, so many of these problems can be solved. Like, I talk about it, but, like, you want to try and open a bank, right? And you got to, like, you need to get a utility bill. Like, what the fuck is that? It doesn't make any sense anymore, right? Maybe it does for the old time or for someone who's in a physical place, but there is no services for this. And, like, if you're a trailblazer like us, you figure it out, you go into the gray zones, and you live in that gray zones. But I think for us to get to mass adoption, that's just not the case. Like, the average person is not going to live in a gray zone. They want a plug and play solution, and that's totally fine. Like, we can't all be trailblazers, right? So
no, super interesting. Well, then, so how do people get involved with Noma then, or how do we help? Where do we go?
So if you speak to someone and they're like, oh, I don't know what to do and I'm in my job and I'm not happy, then send them our way. But Noma-collective.com, you have a very, quick vetting call that we kind of understand a little bit about you and your moment in life and what's the best place for you. I think sometimes people think they want to go to a remote location and they actually don't. They need their like flat white and they're like, whatever. And so, and that's fine too. So, and then you don't, I think that again, it just goes back to that like fear and friction. Like you don't need to uproot your entire life straight away. Come to the network school for a month. Like if you're building, like this is the thing I was talking a little bit with some people last night. It's like, I think depending on what you want to do in that moment, there's plenty of places around the world. So it's like, if you're really focusing on startup culture and wanting to build, like coming here or going to Prospera, like really interesting, right? Those spaces are just so great, And then, but if you're really actually just wanting to, get your personal shit right, maybe you really want to focus on your health, your physical health, and I know they have a great gym here, but, you might want to go to Sri Lanka and do surfing. You may have had a very stressful couple of years in a corporate environment and you're not ready to go into the startup life. I always say to people, like, it's one of the hardest things to do. You need to be physically and mentally, like, really in a good place before you start that, or you will crumble. Like, I've seen it,
Very interesting. Just to dive in there again. So they apply and you reject some people because you're like, sorry, no flat whites.
I said no. So if they're flat whites, I say go to Buenos Aires. There's plenty of coffee shops.
Triage them. You put the
Yeah. And like, the rejection rate is relatively small at the start because, and I probably shouldn't be saying this, but I'm going to because I think it's important, is that actually, we continue to vet you throughout the process as well. So like, it's a relatively low bar because I think a lot of people make mistakes out of ignorance, not malice. And, often what happens, someone will come on a trip and they'll make like an inappropriate racist joke or something like that. And I don't think that's inherently a bad person. We were talking about blacklists yesterday. It's like, I think there's like a lot of opportunity to help someone evolve based on like being in a community that's like, okay, like, hey, that may have been cool where you're from, and if that's like okay, but that's not okay here because we're a global community. And so, and then there's obviously hard lines, like, if you're inappropriate, like sadly, the number one thing that we end up kicking people off for is men being inappropriate towards women, unfortunately. We are very different to this space, and we're like 75% women a lot of the time. So because women feel a little bit less inclined to travel solo, and so this comfort of traveling in a group is really important. And men tend to just go out and do it on their own. And so, it's really important that we continue to create that safe space for those people. And so, that's a line that I feel is very clear that, like, and we do a heavy orientation at the start and let everyone know this isn't like, you're not in a gray area. You know very well where are the lines when you come into the community. And if you cross them, then we're pretty swift on getting you out. And as you scale, that happens more regularly, so probably like 1 or 2 people a month is like where we're at right now of kicking people off.
It's very interesting. Very interesting. This is what's so interesting because you're just like a little bit further ahead on a lot of this stuff than a lot of us also might are, which is why it's so interesting.
Yeah, like, and so there's like the 2 things that I normally use is like, just be a good person. And so, I really like to watch how people interact with front of line staff. I think it's a very clear tell of how someone is because they don't see value in that person and they treat them honestly. So that's like a big tell for me. If someone is treating someone like that rude, then they're not, right for me and our community. And then the other thing is that, like, I believe that social impact and giving back to these local communities is super important. So if you don't have time to do a beach cleanup or an hour with a kid once a week or once a month, like, I'm flexible on the amount of time, but at least make the effort to do it. I also don't think that you're right for this. So there's like, interesting ways that you can without like, so how like interviews are like really not the best way to get to know someone because they know they're in an interview.
Sure.
And so, you're meeting someone's representative a lot of the time. And so, that works for people who are like just mental, because you
Yep.
can tell, but like it doesn't work for like narcissists, for example. They're really good at showing you what that they think you want, right? So yeah, like, post the initial interview, I think it's important to have lots of touch points with these people before they come on site and really get to gauge them. And our community leads have been very, they've done this over and over and over again, whereas like 5,000 people have come through like a 1-month trip now, so they start to, and generally what happens is, you'll flag someone, they'll be like, I think we need to flag this person, and they just get moved into another bucket. And then our like head of community will then have a conversation with that person under the guise of like, oh, we're just checking in to make sure you're ready for your trip type of thing. And then yeah, they'll make a decision. And then, sometimes we'll just be like, okay, I think we want to give this person a chance to succeed. And then we'll let the community facilitator on site know that this is someone that
Interesting.
might need an extra helping hand, or we'll just be like, actually, we don't want your money or you.
Yep.
And
Goodbye.
good luck.
Do you have a defined set of values for Noma?
You need a remote work job, and you need to be a good person. I know that sounds kind of cliche, but I think being a good person is the only thing we need for these communities. I don't want to exclude anyone from this. This is a generational change. We're creating society. You need artists, you need gardeners, you need doctors, you need everyone. And so for us, for me, my focus is top of funnel to this movement, to getting people. Like, I was blessed enough to have 2 parents that traveled the world, and I got that perspective. And I think like if more people had perspective, we would have less echo chambers and less cancel culture, because people would be more benevolent to the way other people fucking live their life, dude. Like, as long as you're not hurting anyone, like, do what you got to do, man. I was at the Folsom Festival in San Francisco, the Kink Festival a couple days ago. I mean, dude, that's a wild place. But everyone is like, it's beautiful because they're like, free to do what they want to do. That's what it's about for me.
Okay, well, what a great note to finish on then, I guess, right? Dan, absolute pleasure for being here.
That's a man.
Thank you, legend. Thank you so much for our
There were entire buildings completely empty, entire streets abandoned. Wait a second, this is such a cool community. This is something which I haven't seen for a long time. Like goosebumps in my skin. These are people I really want to hang out with. Right now, our city is absolutely distressed. In 6 months, we were able to have 450 paying citizens. This is like the first time I'm publicly announcing it. We have now taken ownership of the hotel in San Francisco.